2015, an elite DFS Army Commando unit formed to bring high-level DFS strategy to the masses. Today, hated by DFS sharks and lineup sellers alike, they continue their quest to turn Joe into DFS pros.
Taco Tuesday PGA DFS podcast presented to you by DFSArmy.com. Come check us out at DFSArmy.com and become a member today using promo code TACO for a lifetime 10% off. We cover all daily fantasy sports from golf to baseball to basketball, NASCAR, football, you name it. We cover it. Huge shout out to Hall D, member who just won $100,000 over the weekend during the NASCAR contest. Big shout out to him. We've had a ton of 5 and 6 digit winners so far over the last half year or so. It's been really incredible. A lot of big time winners out there. So why not consider joining the ranks of the DFS Army? Come on in, we'll show you how to be a winner. DFSArmy.com, promo code TACO to support the pod. Moving on to this week, we've got the John Deere Classic in Silvis, Illinois for the PGA Tour stop. And honestly, it's just another weak field, the week right before the Open Championship. We already have the research station out for the Open Championship. You can go check that out as well. On this podcast, I'll be talking about the John Deere Classic. And also towards the end, I'll talk about the Scottish Open a little bit, as this is another one of those weeks like 2 weeks ago when we had the French Open, where the European contest is, it just has a better field than the American contest, and it's not even close. The John Deere Classic is usually the worst field in the entire PGA Tour season. And if you take a look at the guys over there in the Scottish Open, you've got Justin Rose, Ricky Fowler, Patrick Reed, Matsuyama, Kuchar, Rafa Cabrera-Bello, Oosthuizen, Phil Mickelson. I mean, you got some huge names over there. As where if you go to the John Deere Classic, the top of the food chain here, we've got Bryson DeChambeau, Francesco Molinari, and Zach Johnson. So quite a bit of difference in the talent levels here. But you know, despite how strong the fields may be, the contests are always going to be 10 times, 20 times as big as the PGA, or as the European Tour event. That's just kind of always how it will be. So you will want to get into the European Tour contests early, as they'll probably fill pretty quickly. We always see that whenever they have the bigger events like the Abu Dhabi French Open and events like that. But for the John Deere Classic, it's what we'll mainly be focusing on here in this podcast. It's a pretty unique course. It's a par 71, 7,258 yards. Lots of par 4s on this thing. You have a wide variety of par 4s. It's just like last week. Not really one that sticks out a whole lot. Like next week at the Open, we'll see a lot of long par 4s. But here it's kind of spread out. You've got 3 short par 4s, 4 medium length par 4s, and 4 long par 4s. The par 5s and par 3s are kind of spread out as well. So there's not really one overarching hole type that's really going to help you here. You just got to have a well-rounded game, and you really don't want to miss any fairways. The roughs are pretty darn penal here. Good scrambling won't really help you all that much, as you really just want to avoid the greenside areas as much as possible. And you want to be hitting these fairways. Something that we added this week to the research station that should be very helpful is in the historical performances section, we had the historical, distances and accuracy percentages just from the how the players did in that event there. What we did this week is we pulled up the players, we pulled up their averages for the entire season, and we ran some correlations based on that. Just trying to see what kind of players do well here and what kind of sticks out. You expect approach to correlate the highest, which it does, but strokes gained off of the tee actually comes in pretty high, despite the fact that traditional driving stats like driving distance and accuracy, they don't correlate with success here almost whatsoever. When you're looking at just the what players need to do well at during the event to score fantasy points, they really need to be putting well. That is key. Their approach game has got to be locked in because approach and greens and regulation, they really pop off. And when you're looking at the driving stats, distance is still not important, but you really do need to hit your fairways. It's just, when looking back, we've seen a lot of winners that are very, very accurate off of the tee, but overall, driving accuracy doesn't seem to be a real indicator of success here. Just when you run everyone's numbers together, we've had some bombers do really well here. We had John Rahm put up a good performance in 2016. We had Kyle Stanley, who was hitting the ball over 300 yards back in 2011. He had some success here. Johnny Vegas, Troy Madison way back in the day. It's not, you don't absolutely have to be the most accurate. Really, we've seen a lot of players that are both inaccurate off of the tee and short off of the tee that have done well here in the past. Like last year, you had Wes Bryan put up a third place finish. He did extremely well, put up 27 birdies, and he's someone that is both inaccurate and short off of the tee. You see a lot of these guys hitting the ball under 290 yards that are able to have success up here without having to be like Henrik Stenson type of ball strikers or ball drivers, I'd say, that find the fairway every time. Everyone's going to be clubbing down significantly, as a lot of these holes don't require much distance at all, and they require exact placement of the ball. So you really want to target people who don't have a horrible driving accuracy. I wouldn't target anyone in like the 50s. That's going to cause a lot of trouble here. But I'm going to look a lot more towards strokes gained approach. And a lot of your shorter hitters are going to be in play here. If you look at the winners, all the winners since 2010, none of them averaged a 300 plus yard drive, and the only one with any real distance was Bryson DeChambeau last year. All of them averaged over 60% driving accuracy and over 64% greens regulation percentage. So they're all very good ball strikers. The only person that was under the 60% mark there, of course, was Bryson DeChambeau last year. And then looking at the winners again, just in the strokes gained categories, they all gained about a quarter or more strokes approach. But off the tee, we've seen, of all the guys that scored more than 134 DraftKings points out of the winners, none of them have gained strokes off the tee, except for Stricker back in 2010, who gained the smallest amount of strokes off of the tee. So while strokes gained off the tee will correlate with success, just because a lot of the really, really, really bad drivers of the ball will just do really horribly as far as people that just miss the fairway and whatnot. But really, really good driving accuracy doesn't seem to give you like humongous advantage. It's the strokes gained approach. If you're very good at strokes gained approach, you're going to have a good time here. And with a lot of weather in the forecast for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, some thunderstorms, wet greens are going to be really receptive to some aggressive pin seeking. So just targeting the second shot golfers who aren't horrible putters. I saw putting kind of pop up a little bit more in this tournament than I see in most tournaments. You have a lot of good putters here that have won. Of all the winners since 2010, only Bryson DeChambeau lost strokes putting. Everyone else was at least a pretty darn good putter. Harman, Stricker, Ryan Moore, Jordan Spieth, Zach Johnson, all fantastic putters, or at least during the time. Like Spieth back in 2015 when he won, he was a lights out putter. You're going to want to not necessarily look for strokes gained putting as like a stat that you're going to want to attack people on, because we know that's never a great idea. We're mostly going to just make sure that we're not using people that are really horrible putters, and we are going to treat good strokes gained putting as a bonus, but a small bonus. It's not going to be one of the largest numbers in your StatCruncher model this week. That's not going to be the case, but we're going to factor it in ever so slightly, as where most weeks we would either avoid it or target bad putting. I think here we do want to be mindful of who's a very good putter, because on the bent grass greens, the balls roll more true. You're allowed to be a little bit more aggressive with your putting, and if hitting the greens in regulation is the name of the game, being able to knock in those longer putts, that's going to be what separates your guys and puts them on the top of the leaderboard. Unfortunately for Showdown, because we usually try to target the worst putters, it's going to be a little bit harder for the bad putters to kind of equalize themselves in weeks like this, as where we usually don't see that sort of thing. Looking back at the yearly results here, your usual winning score is going to hover around -20. Last year, Bryson won at 18 under. Before that, Moore won at 22 under. Spieth won at 20 under. Harman won at 22 under. Spieth won at 19 under again. Back in 2010, Steve Stricker won with 26 under. We've seen the average scores here come in just shy of 4 strokes under par the last 4 years. 2013 and farther back, the course seemed to play a lot easier, averaging almost 5 strokes under par. We don't see a ton of eagles, just about 0.2 eagles per player on average. There just aren't as many par 5s out there on the course. We do see a pretty fair amount of birdies, though, 11 to 12 birdies per player. And the double bogey numbers are about average. I mean, you can get in some trouble here if you find the rough, but 0.5 to 0.8 double bogeys per player. You can tell it's going to be a high scoring event. Definitely not like a few of the recent weeks that we've had where the winning scores are going to be around -10 or so. Like I said, the winning scores are going to be anywhere from -18 to -24 or so. So guys can really light up this course. Usually round 1 plays a lot harder than round 3. And then I'm not really sure why that is. Just for some reason, year after year, round 3 keeps they keep making it the easiest one on the course. But overall, again, we're just looking for these consistent ball strikers, and the field is just so ridiculously weak that we're really just trying to look for guys that just aren't super terrible, and that's really hard to do, especially once you dip under the 7K range or so. But let's start off with these most expensive players up on the top. You've got a few, not just course horses. You got some like course Mustangs. Like you got some kings of the course history here, and well, we'll talk about them in a little bit here. Let's just go from the top. We got Francesco Molinari, fresh off his victory at the Quicken Loans National. Going to play this to spruce up for the Open Championship next week, I guess. But he's coming in at 11-1, $11,600 on DraftKings, $12,200 on FanDuel. His approach game is always fantastic. Again, 2.5 strokes approach at the Quicken Loans National. All of his numbers are great. Awesome total driver. Greens and regulation have always been the name of his game, and I mean he deserves to be at the top of this field. But coming off his first PGA Tour victory and being more expensive than some guys that have the crazy course history here, Molinari is not going to be overwhelmingly popular by any means. But there's not really much of a reason not to play him if you can afford him, because he really does rate out well for what this course demands. You can definitely think of this as a Molinari course. Anywhere where it's a second shot course where approach rates out higher than everything else. And even with strokes gained off the tee, rating out here pretty decently. I mean, that's something that he is really good at, with both the distance and the accuracy. He used to be a pure accuracy specialist, but he's developed a lot of distance while maintaining that accuracy. A low double bogey or worse percentage. I forgot to mention that that's going to be a stat that we're going to look to in cash games. Make sure that it's under. You definitely want it under 2%, but preferably under 1.5% double bogey or worse percentage. You just really want to avoid the people in the twos and high twos. They could spell trouble for you. That's not what you're really looking forward to in cash games. But after Molinari, you've got Bryson DeChambeau, the defending champion of this tournament, who's just been insanely good this year. I don't know how many made cuts he has in a row now. It looks like the guy has 11 made cuts in a row, if you don't count his withdrawal at the Valspar. And in that's included a victory, 5 top 5 finishes, most recently a 9th place finish at the Travelers Championship. Rating out just excellently this year when it comes to top 25 percentage. Pretty much always posting a top 25, or he's always there. Good showdown play because of his really high fantasy points per hole. And, I mean, the guy's just been on fire this entire season. Gaining strokes all over the place. It's not always just approach or around the green or off the tee. Around the green had been a struggle, and he was excellent in that regard last time out at the Travelers Championships. He's been putting really well over his last 3 events. There's nothing wrong with using DeChambeau here. It's just really hard to use these high-end studs because punting this week is so hard. And playing Bryson kind of makes you have to fade one of Zach Johnson or Steve Stricker here. And it's a tall task. Even in cash games, you can't put Stricker and Johnson together. That's how hard it is to make lineups this week. So DeChambeau, you have to pay a pretty penny for him, but he's absolutely worth the money. He deserves to be costing this much because the results have just been there this year, and of course he won this last year. Didn't miss the cut back in 2015 when he debuted as an amateur, but I still wouldn't look into that as much. He's had some really rough stretches in his career, but this year, in the 2018 season, he's been one of the best golfers, period. So Zach Johnson, $11,200, $11,700 on FanDuel, 13-1 odds, coming in right behind DeChambeau. But his course history here needs no real introduction. You can argue who's better between him and Stricker. I think if you go back the last 20 years or so, Stricker is going to edge out ZJ a little bit here. But if you just look at the last 8 years, he has 7 top 5 finishes. That's ridiculous. Yeah, so he's your 2012 winner. He followed that up with a couple of runner-ups, third in 2015, 2011. And last year, him and Stricker tied for 5th place. So, last year you definitely wanted to be on the course history angle because all the course history guys hit here. You do see, there aren't like a ton of course history guys here, but you have a good handful of guys that just repeatedly, year after year, they just show up for this event. And I mean, Zach Johnson's history at this event, it's right on par. It's better now than Luke Donald's history at the I think it's the RBC Heritage, where he just always would finish like top 3. He ended up missing the cut there, and I think we also saw KJ Choi miss the cut at the Genesis Open. So we've had a few instances this year, even more than that, where we've seen great course histories get derailed. But course history aside, Zach Johnson really makes out for a decent play in this event anyway. He's gained strokes approach in his last 3 events played since the Memorial. Really good around the green game, putting, just solid overall. 82% made cut percentage, 73% adjusted field rank. And outside of Stricker, that's the best of all the studs. Statistically, short off the tee, but that doesn't matter here. Not quite as good as DeChambeau and Molinari when it comes to greens and regulation gained, but usually that's his calling card. We know long-term Zach Johnson has always he's always really focused on his irons and his greens and regulation, so those are actually kind of down from where we've seen those numbers in years past. So Zach Johnson, he really does make for a better play on FanDuel. I think he is clearly the top value over there. On DraftKings, he's priced just right, I think, to where you have to consider using him or Bryson or Molinari or Neiman. I mean, up top you can really kind of go either which way. It is really close as for DraftKings. So let's talk about Neiman here at 10,400, 11,400 on FanDuel. He's 18-1. Obviously, he's been popping off this year since really starting playing weekly since the Texas Open, and he's been the ultimate hit or miss. He is like Mike Wallace in football. He is it right now. It's his finishes are all either 17th or better or missed cut, and there's no middle ground in there. Kind of crazy to think about, but it's true. His if you go all the way back to last year, I mean, his top 30 percentage is the same percentage as his made cut percentage, because he's never made the cut and then just fizzled out. He hasn't done that yet in his career. He's only played 11 events. Keep that in mind. And the average field strength is just over average, just slightly above average. Is where if you look at guys like Molinari and ZJ and Ryan Moore, guys like that, their average field strength is much higher in the 2 and 3%. So Neiman obviously hasn't started qualifying for a lot of big tournaments yet, but the time's definitely now. He's going to he's really been popping off lately. Just the numbers have been insane. He gains strokes approach every single time he tees it up, make the cut or not. He really struggles around the green, but at this course, you just hope that he never has to find the shrubbery and get out of there. But you're really just banking on his ridiculous greens and regulation percentage numbers. He's gaining 8.5 percentage in the greens and regulations gained stat, and that just means he gets 8% more of his greens hit than the field on average. 74% raw greens and regulation percentage. Gains 11 fantasy points per game or per event on the field. I mean, he has that top 5 upside. Obviously, we just saw it last week. He was a really good one and done play for me. Got the 5th place money. I think it was like $250K. So he's starting to sit on some bank. He's got himself probably got himself a few fine models, by his side. Got his confidence up. I mean, if you haven't burned him in one and done yet, you probably should now, because this is the weakest field that there is all year, and it looks like a really nice spot to use him. I personally am using Stricker here. Or no, I'm using Zach Johnson and then playing Stricker more in DFS. That's my strategy. But, if you've used Johnson at one of his other tracks he's good at already, or you use Stricker at Houston or something, then Neiman looks perfect. On DraftKings, I think he's going to be very popular because he's been front and center in everyone's minds over the last few weeks as a top guy. This will be his 3rd crappy field he's played in a row, and he's smashed his last 2 crappy fields. So, I think in GPP you definitely need to get in on him there. I just don't really like him for cash. The double bogey or worse percentage is really high, and of course he does have the downside of being a cut misser from time to time. Ryan Moore, $10,200, 11,000 on FanDuel. He won here in 2016, missed the cut pretty darn badly last year. with him, it's either he seems to be a little bit like Neiman this year, is where he'll have like a top 15 finish or he'll miss the cut, and not much middle ground there as well. But you know that Moore is going to come in with less ownership than Neiman. They're the same right now on the odds books. Long term, he's got much better numbers when it comes to driving accuracy, made cut percentages, field rank. Actually, a similar field rank, just because Neiman is so good at finishing highly in his events. But Moore has really just quietly been performing pretty well. He's had some bad weeks where, like at the Wells Fargo tournament, where he missed the cut by a stroke or two. The same with the Travelers, but for the most part, he's really consistent. Good long-term cut maker, and he just can't putt. That's his thing. He's always losing strokes putting, just always. So that's the one concern there. But he makes for a really nice GPP play. He had 5 straight top 25s before that win. I know he missed the cut last year, but still, just a really nice little GPP sort of pivot. Would think of him as a cash play, but you're not going to use him in cash over Stricker. That's not going to happen. So let's talk about Steve Stricker here a little bit. Doesn't matter how far you go back in this tournament. His tournament history here is always wicked. 5th last year. And he had some shaky performances back in 2016, 2015. 52nd place finish, T35 in 2015. Like, those are horrible. But the farther you go back, the more it's like, oh my god. This is the king of the course right here. 11th in 2014, 10th in 2013, 12th in 2012. And then he won 3 times in a row between 2009 to 2011. The guy he does exactly what you need to do well here. His approach game has always been just on point, and his putter, I mean, he's just one of the best putters of all time. It's Steve Stricker. I mean, the course is pretty much made for him. He doesn't have to be very long off of the tee, and he never really is, although 290 is not too shabby for him. He's got by far the best adjusted field rank of anyone in this entire field, and that's with a sample size of 22 events. I mean, it's not bad. He that shows that he beats about 80% of the golfers he tees it up with at any given event. 86% made cut percentage. He's just fantastic for cash games. I expect him to be fairly popular. Top 30 finishes his last 4 times out. He only had the 1 miscut at Houston, and that's a little bit concerning considering that was the week before a major at a tournament where he had a really good course history at. So, that is something to think about with Stricker. If he misses the cut there, then maybe that's the start of a trend. But I don't really care. I would use him in one and done if it wasn't for the fact that Zach Johnson was so expensive. So that's kind of what made me use him in one and done and kind of fade him a little bit in DFS. I'll probably still be overweight on Zach Johnson. I'm using a ton of Stricker, like a ton. He just represents more value to me at $9,800. 11.5 for him on FanDuel, though. That's really expensive. So on FanDuel, play Zach Johnson. You've got Kyle Stanley, $9,700. I think he's definitely going to go overlooked because his price is up there. But he's 24-1 on the books, and Stricker is 22-1. Stanley has won recently, as where Stricker has not. That might have something to do with it, but I mean, Stanley does rate out pretty well for what you want here at this course. I know that he lost over a stroke approach at the Quicken Loans, and that was a real accuracy course. That was the last one that we'd seen. I think the Quicken Loans National kind of relied a little bit more, actually a lot more on driving accuracy than this course does. I think this course is more geared toward greens regulation and approach, but still, Stanley is really accurate off of the tee. It's just, and he's really, like, his strokes gained, approach, and greens regulation numbers are really, really, really good long term. Just last time out, it was a little tiny bit shaky, but other than that, I mean, he's really, he's a solid fit for the most part. It's just for $100 more, you get Stricker, and that's gonna make him go kind of under-owned. But if you want to fade Stricker for Stanley and GPP and, hope that he misses the cut again before a major or something, I mean, that I could definitely see that happening as well. Then there's a real drop-off kind of after these guys as the field starts to get really, really bad, and you see guys that you've seen in the 7 and 6K range all year be priced in the 9,000s. So you got Chesson Hadley at $9,500. He had bounced back after 2 missed cuts in a row with a top 20 finish. And where have we seen that before? Oh, we've already seen that so far, like twice this year. So in the swing season, he was putting up like top 3 finishes over and over, and then he just missed the cut like horribly, like twice in a row. Then he turned around and started getting like top 30 finishes, right? And that goes into the beginning of the season, comes 5th at the Waste Management. He's just having an incredible bounce back year, and then comes the Honda Classic and the Valspar, and 2 less than driver courses. He just comes like dead last in both of them. Not like dead last, but he did really poorly, like several strokes off. And then immediately from there, he turns things around, just top 20 finish after top 20 finish after top 20 finish. And then, most recently we've seen at the U.S. Open and the Travelers Championship, he misses the cut. Not horribly this time, but by a few strokes. Misses the cut twice in a row. Then he turns around and has an 8th place finish. So I'm starting to catch his MO a little bit here. Obviously, I don't believe in raw patterns like that enough to to really, make this too much of a play for me here. But I think Hadley is, like, you don't want to play him after he's missed, the 2 cuts pretty recently. But we've seen him bounce back with some consistency, and that's just what he's been doing since coming back on tour. The numbers are there. I mean, of anyone that we've talked about so far, he has the highest number of fantasy points gained per event. 15 fantasy points, or he gets 15 more fantasy points than average of the people that play in the same events as him. That's kind of like really sneaky, but he does have a lot of top 20 finishes this year. So he has the upside, and he even has a damn near winning upside, or like top 3 upside. So with Hadley, him and Stanley are going to be kind of sneaky choices, although I think, Hadley kind of is on a bit of a salary island with no one within $2,000 or $200 of him either way. So he might just get a little bit of love just due to that. And the game log still looks pretty good for people scrolling down because the top 20s are still there. So I don't know. Hadley, the approach game, that lines up with him perfectly. He's constantly gaining strokes approach. So if you want to use Hadley, that's perfectly fine. I don't think he rates out super highly just because his price is so high. Maybe on FanDuel, actually, he's not bad. I don't know. Stanley's cheaper on FanDuel, and I'd probably use Stanley over Hadley here. But I do believe Hadley is also a good value over on Draft for doing the Serpentine drafts. I think he has really low projection there. But on to Austin Cook here, who we've seen once again pop off here for his second top 6 finish in 3 events. And they've been kind of random because if you look at his last 5 events, he's missed 3 cuts. And then had that 6th at the St. Jude Classic and 5th last week at Greenbrier. Those were 2 weaker fields. So I don't really know. If you look at where he gained the strokes at those events, it was off the tee and it was approach. The 2 events, the events where he's missing the cut, he's not gaining strokes off the tee or with approach, and he's gaining them through putting. Actually, his putting has been really good over the last few events that he's played. So, Austin Cook, he's just so expensive now. This is a guy I was really, really bullish coming into the year with. I mean, he had played sparingly before this year and had a lot of really, really good results. He's never played this course before, but he's just someone to keep an eye on. We had been getting him at really, really nice value for a long time, at like 6-7K. So seeing him at 9K is kind of off-putting, but he gains 12 fantasy points to the field as well. Low double bogey or worse percentage. Just okay numbers outside of that. The good made cut percentage, obviously, although recently that hasn't been the case. But you've also seen his upside recently, so just another GPP play. Wes Bryan, $9,100 on DraftKings, $9,000 on FanDuel. Very good value on FanDuel. This is a course where he's had success so far, 3rd and 8th in his debut in the last 2 years. And he's kind of turned it on recently with 4 straight made cuts, 12th at the St. Jude and 26th last year at the Greenbrier Classic. This is a guy who cannot gain a stroke off of the tee if you paid him to, and that's definitely why he's been doing so well here at this course, because when you take that off of the table, he's not bad. When it comes to the short game, the approach game, it's just off the tee. He's just miserable, both inaccurate and short, hitting only 284 with a 56% driving accuracy percentage. It's not good. He has a high double bogey or worse percentage, though, so it kind of makes me think about him in cash. I know it looks like he rates out pretty well here at 9-1. It makes him, a good spot to finish off your rosters, especially on DraftKings or on FanDuel. It's just, it's just kind of an iffy play with how inaccurate he is off of the tee and how he can find trouble with the double bogeys and all that. But I think even for GPPs, he has some high upside. I mean, the finishes he's had in the last 2 years, he scored well over 100 fantasy points each time. So, I mean, if you want to use Brian, go for it. I'm not going to be too huge on him, just because, I actually like him. I'll use him a good amount on FanDuel. On DraftKings, I don't know. I think I'm just kind of focusing a bit more on the top kind of guys, and then just going way down deeper into wherever I can find the value down there. It's hard this week. You've got David Lingmerth, 9,000 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. He's been playing hot recently, but if you look back much farther than that, it's pretty bad. Rarely gained strokes approach, but did last week at his 11th place finish at the Greenbrier. Played here once and had a missed cut, so I'm not really on him. Only on FanDuel, I'd guess. Chris Kirk, I'm not touching on FanDuel, $10,400, but $8,900 on DraftKings is pretty good. His last 6 events, he's made the cut, 6th and 11th recently at the St. Jude Classic and Fort Worth Invitational. So definitely worth some shots at. This is the type of course where Kirk can have a lot of success. Hasn't played in about a month, but maybe he's just been chilling. I mean, if I was him, I'd be chilling. That's for sure. I just like his fit for the course, and I think he definitely deserves to be higher in salary than Lingmerth, Bryan, and Cook, in my opinion. So I think he's a pretty good play this week. You've got Patrick Rogers, who was runner-up in this event last year. He had turned it around recently, but had a pretty bad miscut last week at the Greenbrier. Just kind of really wayward off of, not off the tee, but off the fairway. His approach game has just been really, really inconsistent. He's had some poor performances, so I'm kind of shaky with Rogers here. And he costs so much now. I liked him a lot better when he was down the 6K range with all the other punts. Andrew Landry, he finished 8th here in 2016, and the only time he seeded up here, and 8th most recently at the Quicken Loans Invitational. Before that, he had been a miscut machine, or at least he'd make the cut and then just do horribly over the weekend. But he finished dead last at the Travelers, but he also won in Texas. So this guy has some crazy upside. He's like Neiman on steroids, sort of, where he's either missing the cut or he's competing to win. And if this is a spot where he can compete to win, I mean, who knows? I don't really know what to make of this guy. I mean, his stats kind of morph in and out. His play is so wildly inconsistent. It's all over the place. The only thing with any consistency is that he is consistently mediocre around the green. That's the most consistency I can find from the guy. Brian Gay, $8,600, $10,000 on FanDuel. He's kind of really came into his own here recently. He had before he had been a guy where he has some top 10 upside but misses a lot of cuts. He's been oddly consistent recently, with six straight made cuts for him, and 4 top 20s in that span. At this tournament, though, he debuted here in 2011 with a 9th place finish. Since then, yet to make the cut. Well, he did make the cut once in 2013, finished T61. So just a lot of bad performances here. He's really, I liked him a lot not last week, but at the Quicken Loans where he ended up finishing 8th. I loved him a lot there because he is just pure driving accuracy. A lot of the times guys with good driving accuracy get lumped in with the guys with good greens of regulation numbers and approach numbers, but that's not really Gay. Gay is just raw driving accuracy. As far as approach goes, he's generally losing strokes approach, not like by a lot, but just slightly. But you can play him down here because there aren't many options that I don't hate. I mean, most of the guys in the 8K range I just hate. So if I don't hate a guy, that's kind of like liking him by default. Because looking at the guys around here, Rogers, Landry, Wise, Lee, Piercy. I mean, I hate Kang. I hate all of these guys. Like, I'm going to skip some of these. Like, Aaron Wise, he had the runner-up at the Wells Fargo and then won at the Byron Nelson. And since then, he's missed 4 cuts. I kind of hate that, but he finished 16th in 2016 at his debut here. So, I don't know. Wise is supposed to be like what... He's supposed to be doing what Neiman is doing right now. Not this miscut stuff, but, maybe he can turn it around. I don't know. Danny Lee, just so god-awful on the stats. I don't know why he's priced the way he is, so I hate him. And then Scott Piercy has good course history here, but I also hate him because he's just, his approach numbers long-term have been, the reason that you play him, his greens in regulation and stuff, but, at the St. Jude, he lost 2 strokes approach. Most recently at the Greenbrier, he lost half a stroke approach. That's just not what I want to see from Piercy, who's just a greens regulation specialist. But I mean, if it comes on for him, I could definitely see why he's had success here in the past, being so good with his approach game. It's just not really on right now from what I can see. And Sung Kang, I have no idea why he's priced this way. He really should not be. He's not good. Just not good at all. I know he's 3rd at the Quicken Loans, but he had like insane course history there. Like the 2 times he played, he finished like top 5, and he had another top 5. So I'm willing to throw that one out because every other event he's finishing, T151st, 125th, 112th, 140th, 110th. Just no. So screw off with Kang here. Then we have Streelman, who, God knows what's up with Streelman lately. He was the beacon of consistency. He was just so consistent until the Texas Open. Then after that, it had just gone to chaos. 3 straight missed cuts. Turned it around with 3 straight pretty decent made cuts, like top 40 finishes, but no top 30s. Just making the cut and just kind of being there. And then, at the Quicken Loans, he was competing and then just blew up on the weekend. Just had like a horrible Sunday. And then at the Greenbrier, he missed the cut by a stroke and just screwed over my one lineup that was just so perfect with that. I had Lahiri and who was it? Kraft and stuff like that. But whatever. We'll forgive you, Streelman, because your stats are just off the charts right now. His approach numbers, he dwarfs everybody else in the field pretty much. In his last 6 rounds, he's gained 1.5, 0.8, 1.8, 1.3, then half stroke approach, 0.7 strokes approach, like consistently. And that's per round, like gaining a stroke or more, like per round approach. And off the tee has not been bad either. Last 2 times he's teed it up, he's gained over a stroke off the tee. It's just around the green in his putting game. Pretty much every single week he's coming in negative. So while you do want those approach numbers and you want them oh so bad, at what cost? The putting isn't like horrifyingly bad like some guys I'll talk about as we get down the field here. But the around the green game has looked like at certain times it's been about that bad. The last 5 weeks he's lost over half a stroke around the green. So you hope that he hits the greens or continues to hit these greens, because if he doesn't, he's in a world of trouble. So I would avoid him in cash, even though it looks like he rates out for cash. He's one of our highest values because of where he's priced on DraftKings. He just has some concerns with him with his short game. It's not good. But again, the pickings are so slim down here, you might have to pick him anyway. You got Keith Mitchell, $8,000. He's really, really good at gaining strokes off of the tee, and that is that's about it. That's what he does. Last week he was really good with his approach game, but it had been really bad in the weeks prior. He's kind of really inconsistent with that. Pretty much always bad at putting. He can just gain a lot of strokes off of the tee, but he's kind of wildly inconsistent. He gains almost 11 fantasy points to the field, but his double bogey or worse percentage is over 3%. He has some top 5 finishes, a couple of them, but he also has some dead lasts. He's a bomber, hits it 314 yards off the tee, and that's not going to help him here. So Mitchell, I generally do like. At this field, I don't really like him a ton, but he's going to be an option just because of the lack of options. You got Kevin Tway, who finished 12th here last year, and he's had some top 10 finishes recently, surrounded by missed cuts. He has no driving accuracy. He's just kind of a bomber. But, he's kind of similar to Keith Mitchell, except he's a more consistent version of him. He doesn't gain the strokes off the tee, really, because he is pretty inaccurate off the tee. As where Mitchell is a bit more accurate off of the tee. But Tway does have a more consistent approach game. And a short game that's not even really that terrible. His putting is actually not good, but it's consistently above average. Just slightly. So I like Tway. I'll probably prefer him over Mitchell in that range, but really you're going to try to push into the lower 7K range, at least on DraftKings here. You got some plays you can take shots at. Johnson Wagner has 3 top 10s here in the last 4 years, but missed the cut most recently. He's oftentimes really, really bad, 51% made cut percentage, but he has made some cuts recently. He's made 5 of his last 6 cuts, with a couple of top 20 finishes in there. So that with the course history combined, maybe, but he's gaining strokes approach just ever so slightly week after week. So he doesn't look like he has any real pitfalls in his game right now. I just know that his game can turn into a real pitfall real soon, because the dude loves to miss cuts and stuff, but he also likes to randomly win, so who knows about Wagner. Then you've got Kraft, who's kind of the same deal. He misses a ton of cuts, but sometimes he almost wins. He has that top 5 upside. Last week you saw it, and he's usually an approach game specialist. Last week he only gained 0.6 strokes approach. That really hasn't been where he's gained a lot of his strokes recently. Usually he's just missing the cut, but last week he had a pretty darn good overall performance and actually gained the most strokes through putting, like we oftentimes see with these kind of random pop-up performances. They're usually due to putting. You've got Siwoo Kim here at 7,800. Ryan Blom as well, who had been looking great but blew up last week. Just his approach game was freaking terrible. So I don't really know about using him. In the mid 7K range here, you've got a good amount of plays. It's just hard to fit in these guys if you're going to go to the uppity up of the salary level here, get your Brysons and Zach Johnsons and stuff. But CT Pan at $7,700, 8.8 on FanDuel. He's been really, really good. He had the 1 week where everyone had him at the Travelers Championship and he missed the cut. But that's the only missed cut that he's had in 7 events. And lots of top 20s in those as well. 3 top 20 finishes. Most recently 17th at the Quicken Loans National. Pretty good when it comes to the approach game, short game. Really just overall game has been... I don't see any instances in which he's losing over a stroke in any one category. He's got a pretty well-rounded game. So I kind of like him here. And you've got Joel Dahman, who's kind of been popping off recently. He had a couple of missed cuts, but he's been in this streak of top 25 finishes outside of that. And his last 8 finishes, or his last 7 finishes, he has 5 top 20 finishes, or top 25 finishes. But he also has the 2 missed cuts outside of that. He finished almost last here last year. Had a really, really bad outing. But his approach numbers have been lights out. They're up there with Streelman. They're probably the second best approach numbers of anyone that I've talked about yet. Last week he gained over 2 strokes approach. He's done that on a multitude of occasions this year. So Dahmen's definitely someone that I'm very high on, despite the results of last year, because Dahmen's playing at a much higher level than he was last year, and that is certain. You've got Andrew Putnam at $7,600, $10,300 on FanDuel, so quite the difference there. He had missed the cut last week at the Greenbrier, and that had broke a good streak that he had of some really good finishes. Second at the St. Jude Classic, 20th at Fort Worth. He finished like dead last year in 2015, and that's the only time he's teed it up here. So that's a concern. He's also lost strokes approach his last 2 times out. That's another concern I have with him. But he's going to be another source of value here in this range. If you go odds to pricing, he sticks out even more than Dahmen does, and Duncan, and some of these other guys down here. Speaking of Duncan, he has I think 7 straight made cuts now, but like no top 30 finishes. So you kind of know what you're going to get with Duncan. His adjusted field rank is 48%. We try to attack guys that are, above average, above 50%. But, Duncan, 5 straight rounds, or 5 straight events where he's gained strokes approach. And he's played, this would be a 6th week in a row that he's played. That's kind of concerning. Just since the U.S. Open, it's been nonstop with him. For the same price, you got Nick Watney, who I always like, and he's kind of sneakily getting back into form after kind of losing it for a little bit. I don't know. He's just really, with his approach game, he's usually good with his approach game, but he's either there or he's not there at all. He has some really, really bad weeks. Like at the Byron Nelson, he was just god awful in every way. Or it wasn't the Byron Nelson, it was the Fort Worth Invitational. Just couldn't have been any worse. And of course, that's where I went out on him. But I digress. Watney could be a cheesy little pick to get off of Duncan, off of Reeve here. Talk about him real quick. He's $7,500 on DraftKings. Reeve is, and he's not been very good recently, but this is a course where he has some good history at. The numbers really do stick out here. Good at gaining fantasy points per hole, fantasy points for the course. Just really, really good. Good made cut percentage long term. Adjusted field rank is 67%. Kind of makes him stick out around with all the guys in this range here. It's just recently he's been missing the cut, but it's only been like a stroke or 2. So keep that in mind as well. He did finish 6th at the St. Jude Classic. Reeve really does have some upside here, and the course just fits for him perfectly. And you've got Scott Stallings, who has some weird course history here. 5th last year, 16th in 2016. The 3 finishes before that, 141st, 141st, and 150th. That's kind of like what his form looks like now, honestly. Most recently, he was 13th out there, but he also has some like dead last finishes. Like dead last. So GPP play for sure. He's been flirting with good approach numbers, but it's one of those where he'll gain strokes one week and the next week he'll lose as many strokes and then come back the next week. It's not consistent. I like to look for some consistency with these guys, and I don't know if I've mentioned it so far yet on the podcast, but you can use the new strokes gain tab on the research station. And you can see strokes gained week by week to see trends and guys and try to see who's been good and consistent recently. So here we go into the lower 7K range, and this is where the meat of this field is going to kind of be, because you're going to need to dive into this range to find your value, because 6K and underneath is just garbage. Just so bad. So here you've got at the $7,500 range, I'd already talked about Reeve and Stallings. Bronson Burgoon is going to be someone you also need to think about. He's had some good finishes in a row. Great at total driving. Really tee to green. He's been doing a lot of work, and his putting is just almost exactly average every single week. So I know long-term his stats are bad. He had a horrible start to the season. It doesn't play a whole lot, but recently he has shown a little bit of upside here, and in 2016 he made the cut in his debut. So that's something, Usually that's not worth a play, but in this field it kind of is. You got JT Poston at $7,400. He has 5 top 40 finishes in his last 6 events played. That's not too shabby. But at the Travelers Championship, he did just a horrible job. But that was all putting. He lost all of his strokes putting, and that's not bad. That's kind of what we want to see. What we don't want to see are his 5 events in a row where he's lost strokes off the tee, or not off the tee, approach. He's lost strokes approach. Consistently gains them ever so slightly off the tee. Just the approach numbers, I mean, I know it's under average, but at least it's not horrible. He has no horrible weeks, and it's kind of consistent. So it's something. I don't know. With Poston, I don't know. He did this last year where he just made all of the cuts, and then he just hit a brick wall and missed all the cuts in a row. So it's hard to really gain trust in guys like that back, but he really has started to put enough top 20s together where I'm getting interested, but every single time he's posted the top 20, it's been kind of due to the putting, not really due to his approach game or even his off-the-tee game. I mean, you've got Harold Varner, the third, $7,400, $8,700 on FanDuel. That's a good FanDuel value over there. 5th last week at the Greenbrier, and he's gained over a stroke approach in this last 2 times out, and that had kind of been a weakness for him, but it's hard to really establish a trend with just 2 weeks worth of those strokes gained, those sweet strokes gained approach, but it's an encouraging sign, and it'll probably lead me to playing him at least a little bit. You've got Bill Haas, who you can really only count on to not double bogey. At a scores course, I don't know if he really has the upside to drop all of those birdies. So I don't really want to use Haas here a lot. I'd prefer him if the winning score was like -7. Then you've got a couple of guys in the $7,300 range. A couple of rookies who love to make cuts this year. You've got Corey Connors and Brandon Harkins. Probably guys who are tired of rostering at this point because they've always been perpetually underpriced, and they just make cuts. They have a 78 and 79% made cut percentage, respectively. Now, here's the giant difference between the two, and this is why I love the adjusted field rank so much. Corey Connors' adjusted field rank is 46%. That's not good. That's bad. On average, he is usually on the bottom half of the fields, despite making the cut 78% of the time. It's ridiculous. He loves to make the cut and then just barely make the cut, and when he misses it just horribly. He loves to finish like 68th. He did that exactly at the St. Jude Classic. That's kind of what I'm looking at. But he does that a lot, where he makes the cut and does nothing on the weekend. Recently, he's had some top 30, top 40 finishes, and he's made all these cuts in a row. Just how many of these cuts are, garbage cuts? A lot of them are. And when you look at the stats, we're kind of prone to using him a ton in Showdown if you're targeting tee to green and fading putting, because he's been great, just so solid. Last 3 times out, he's gained almost a stroke in both off the tee and approach. And putting, it's just been god-awful, just horrible. Just not even losing strokes, losing several strokes putting, week after week. At an event like this on bent grass where putting comes in and kind of matters, right now Corey Connors comes in as our number 1 projected value. And it makes sense considering how they refuse to price him up despite being such a ridiculous cut maker. I just worry about his bad putting, but at the same time, if he turns it around and has an okay putting week, he's going to smash. He's going to have another top 10 finish. And we saw that at the Fort Worth Invitational. We saw exactly that. So you kind of want to really play him and just bank on his cut-making prowess and his tee to green game, his approach game, which has been on fire the last 3 weeks. And you kind of ride that to a made cut. Don't complain too much about a made cut, especially here. But with the weak field, perhaps he can finally do something with it. And then you got Harkins, whose made cut percentage is very similar, but has a much better adjusted field rank. He started this season off just tremendously, and had kind of cooled off a bit recently, but has 4 top 40 finishes in a row. But every single one of those finishes has been in between 30th place and 40th place. So if you kind of want an expectation for him, it's pretty much that. He has gained a lot of fantasy points. Gains over 12 fantasy points to the field on average, just because he loves making these cuts. And, in the beginning of the season, he had some really good performances. And perhaps that upside is still here, especially at a field like this. But the thing about Harkins is he gets a lot of his strokes gained through putting. And he's different than Connors. He really is different. He's really wildly inconsistent with the approach game. At the Memorial, he lost over 3 strokes approach. And that was like his worst performance of the entire year. And most recently, he lost almost a full stroke approach at the Greenbrier, but he had a great showing at the Quicken Loans where he gained over a stroke. So that's, inconsistent. His putting is very inconsistent. He's sometimes gaining a stroke and a half, sometimes losing. With Harkin, it's basically like in Connors, right now I'm playing Connors in my cash lineup because he kind of, comes off as a real cash play, as where Harkins would be the GPP play, the big GPP play, since he can, he's so, he has so many wild swings in his production. So that's kind of how I'm attacking those guys. You've got some other options. I'm kind of liking Alex Sejka at $7,300. 4 straight top 40 performances from him. It's just a lot of that has come from the short game. So you have to keep that in mind. Don't go too crazy on him. You've got Rory Sabatini, who turned things around after a couple of bad miscuts in a row, after pretty much not dropping a cut all season long up till that point. T39 last week at the Greenbrier, 19th here last year. He's just going to be a mix and match sort of play. You've got Troy Merritt, who was in a pretty good role until the Travelers Championship, and he missed the cut there, but turned it around at the T17 at the Quicken Loans last time out. He's definitely someone that you can play a little bit. Sam Saunders, 5th last week at the Greenbrier, you can play him a little. Fabian Gomez, he's made 5 cuts in a row. I just kind of worry he's gotten a lot of his production through the short game and putting especially, and that's always kind of been his MO, is that sometimes he can catch fire putting, and he's gotten wins that way before. He's gotten wins on the PGA Tour just by raw putting, so he does have that kind of upside, but you kind of would just play him because he's been consistently making some cuts and he's so cheap, and the options are just really bad. Lower 7K range here, it's pretty much all bad. There are a handful of plays that you can try and make. Zach Blair has been improved recently, but he was just so bad in the beginning of the season. It's hard to use him. He will be low owned at least. Cameron Percy has looked all right. Hasn't played much this season, but he's put some made cuts together. 12th here in this event last year, so he's probably worth the consideration at 7-1. Another course history kind of guy. 5 top 25 finishes in 6 events. That'd be Scott Brown at 7,100, 7,300 on FanDuel. So a really good punt on FanDuel would be Scott Brown, just kind of for the course history. He has 3 made cuts in a row, but those weren't really quality made cuts, and he has a lot of missed cuts if you go back farther. Like, he's not had a very good season, so play him, but be cautious about it. Blaine Barber at 7,500 for FanDuel. He's looking like an okay punt. 3 straight made cuts for him, but it's been pretty. Another guy that if you just go back farther, it's just all bad. That's down in this range. You really have to just roster guys like that. You've got Vaughn Taylor at $6,900. That's a fine option. I know he's straight off the missed cut, but if you look farther back than that, before that he had 6 made cuts in his last 7 events, and 3 top 20 finishes in that span. That's the kind of upside you're looking for, and this is a very good course for Taylor. He finished top 20 here last year, and generally makes the cut. It's this kind of course where you can use his driving accuracy, and he isn't really penalized by his lack of driving distance, stuff like that. But yeah, that's about as far as you want to go down, honestly. Under $6,800, I really have a hard time picking anybody, maybe just some random shots at like J.J. Henry or Nicholas Lindheim, or maybe take another shot at Norman Jung, who just missed the cut by a stroke last week. I mean, it's just so bad down at the bottom. You can't really justify playing any of these guys. So you just kind of don't. And on FanDuel, you go to the bottom, and you've got a couple of guys that are really mispriced compared to DraftKings, like Andrew Landry really sticks out. Percy and Barber, I'd mention them. And then it's just so bad. So hard to play when the pricing is pretty tight and the field is so weak. Next week we're going to be able to punt top tier players. This week, we have to consider paying for some really trashy players. So that's just the difficulty that comes with a loaded field. Now I wanted to talk about the Scottish Open this week. I know we're already hit the hour mark here. I just wanted to point out a few plays that I think are really worth a consideration here. You have to remember that when you're looking at course history here, only look at the year 2015. That's the only other time that they have played on this course, as this is a rotating course event. You've got Justin Rose as your favorite to win at 9.9 to 1 odds, and I would almost bet that, or find the top 10 and bet that, because Justin Rose has been cash money this season. Oh my God, he has not missed a cut. He has had top 10, top 5, top 1 upside constantly, always in competition, or just always there, or always lurking to be in contention. So, man, I know that Rose finished 74th here back in 2015. It wasn't too hot, but that year in particular, he was dealing with an injury. It's important to remember that. Then you've got Ricky Fowler at $11,500. He won this event in 2015. It's his first European Tour event of the year, and he's Ricky Fowler. If you want to play him, go for it, but he's going to be very popular. I can tell you that as far as ownership goes. Patrick Reed, $10,700. I did add just some basic stats for the European Tour event. You should go check it out. I love how they've got their stats set up. They have everything on their website automatically kind of adjusted to the field, which is very nice. So instead of using distance and accuracy and greens regulation, I use distance gained to the field, fairways gained to the field, and greens regulation gained to the field. So some guys really stick out in these categories, and it's worth pointing out. And if you I can't talk about any of these guys up top here because these are the Americans that are making their debut for the year. We've got Matsuyama as well at $10,000. You got Tyrrell Hatton at $10,500, who I bet won't be popular at all because he's missed some cuts and was horrible during the American swing of the season around the Masters and such. But if you look back from the Dubai Desert Classic and back, it's all top 15s for him. So he could be sneaky, but I mean, if you're going to spend money up top, it's probably going to be on a PGA Tour player. You've also got Russell Knox at $9,800, who went overseas, warmed up with a second place finish at the Open de France, and then he took one home for the boys, winning the Scottish Open. It's kind of a big deal for him, as he is Scottish himself. Or not Scottish. This is the Scottish Open, right? He won the Irish Open. He annexed Ireland and took it home. Suck it, Rory. He won Rory's event from him. This week, who knows? He could win this week and make me correct. But I don't want to be too presumptuous. I know that Knox has been on fire, and he'd been playing a lot better on the PGA Tour as well. But it's really hard to beat the precedent you set when you start your season on the European Tour with a second and a first. I mean, he's sitting there at a 99% average field rank. Those numbers are unsustainable. But so far, the two events he's played, he's done it all through greens or regulation. I think this is more of an accuracy course, if I do recall correctly. But with the European Tour, you kind of want to focus on course history a bit more than on the PGA Tour, and then overall acumen and recent form. That kind of usually trumps all when it comes to the European Tour. And there's almost no better example of recent form than Andy Sullivan, because Tommy Fleetwood is not playing in this event. He withdrew for rest. But if you look at Andy Sullivan, the guy has been amazing. No finish worse than 35th in his last 10. Yeah, I think it's his last 10 finishes. No, last 11. No finishes worse than 35th, and he has 5 top 10s in that span. Definitely someone to consider over there in the European Tour. He is always pretty much a cash game consideration anytime you whip open the Euro section of DraftKings there. He's pretty much always just a solid cut maker. You've got Ian Poulter, who does amazingly overseas. You got Matt Kuchar teeing it up for the second time this year. He also he finished T32 at Abu Dhabi to begin the European Tour season, going over there for the Scottish Open, which he almost won back in 2015 on this course. Finished runner-up to Ricky that year, so $9,400. I mean, I would play him because I love me some Kuchar Mang. I don't know about cash, though. I really don't. I don't know about playing American players in cash games in Europe, just because they're usually cash game players in America. Sometimes things can get a little bit dicey, and you have some weird miscuts out of nowhere on the European Tour because everything's very different. You got Louis Oosthuizen, who hasn't played much in the European Tour, but I wouldn't fade him over there. Phil Mickelson, we haven't seen him over there either, so who knows about him? Play him if you want to. Cabrera Bello, who's been he's had some tough performances at the Irish, missing the cut there. Made the cut and did very poorly at the Open de France, but usually in Europe, RCB is lights out. He's usually a top 10. He usually gets top 10s more than he doesn't. He has a 43% top 10 percentage, so he could strike at any time. Yet Chris Wood, who's been playing really well lately, $8,800. You got Peter Uihlein making the return to the European Tour. He pretty much dominated it last year before going to the PGA Tour full time, and he's returning back home. It's not really home for him; he's an American, but he is very good on the European Tour. I wouldn't be surprised to see him light it up once again. He was 12th last week at the Irish Open. And then you've got a guy that's been just killing it no matter where he's been. Ryan Fox, runner-up last week at the Irish Open. And he was also up there at the U.S. Open. He's really made a name for himself. 27% in the distance gain stat. That's just so much better than anyone else. He's just a super power bomber who is also incredible when it comes to greens and regulation gained. So I really like his... I like how he lines up for the course there. You've got a cheap Thomas Pieters at $8,300. Just scrolling down through the 7K range, some notable names: Dylan Fratelli at 8K, Martin Keimer at 8K. You really don't want to be fading Keimer on the European Tour. I know he missed the cut pretty badly at the Open de France, but usually is a top 10 threat. Alexander Bjork at $7,900. I think that is an excellent steal. Average field rank this year of 81%. Winner of the Volvo China Open, and third at the Trophy Hassan, sixth at the Omega Dubai Desert Classic. His last 2 finishes, 8th at the Open de France, 14th in the Irish Open. Ranks number 1 in the entire field in strokes gained approach. I mean, come on. Excellent player right there. In the 7K range here, you've got Adrian Otegui. I don't really know, but he has been lights out so far this season. Gained a ton of fairways and greens regulation. Just gaining strokes in every category. You've got to consider him at $7,500. He's right there with Kevin Chappell, and I know, despite the odds, I'd rather play Otegui than Chappell. That's for sure. And if you go down to the lower 7K range, a guy that sticks out constantly, Eric Van Rooyen, 4th last week at the Irish Open. Had an unfortunate miscut at the Open de France where I used him a bunch, but really likes to make the cut a lot more often than not. 69% made cut percentage, 78% made cut percentage with a 69% adjusted field rank, and he's been awesome when it comes to off the tee and strokes gained approach, and greens regulations gained. Really pops in those numbers. And for showdown purposes, he really likes to peak in round 1 and 2 and then do nothing in the weekend. So always keep that in mind. I do have the strokes gained by round broken up for both the European Tour and PGA Tour Domination Station. I have it further broken down by AM and PM tee times for the PGA one, so that's really nice. Be sure to check that out. And just to finish this field off, you've got some interesting names. Luke List is making his European Tour debut for some reason. You've got Soren Kjeldsen, who is always a popular name, just a pure approach guy. Jordan L. Smith, he's only at $7,100, great value for him. He's usually quite the cut maker, and for the rest, just use the research station, try to pick out some plays. With the European Tour, you really just want to avoid the handful of guys are going to be overwhelming chalk, because that always happens on the Euro events. Try to avoid the chalk, and then just focused on some basic pivots or some sneaky guys down there. I know there was one person I'd wanted to point out here. Here it is. Raphael Jacquelin, $7,100, runner-up in this event in 2015, tied with Matt Kuchar. He's coming in fresh off of a top 10 finish at the Irish Open, third at the Shot Clock Masters as well, 37th at the Open de France. So his form coming in is not bad. Runner-up at this event last year, $7,100, good approach game. I think that makes for a really nice play. So way down low, it's got to be someone that you consider there. And if you want to go any lower, you just got to come check out the research station over here at DFS Army, dfsarmy.com. You can check us out. If you like the content that I've talked about, you want to come check it out for yourself, check us out using the link in the description. And upon sign up, use promo code TACO for a lifetime 10% off. This is Taco. It's been a fun Taco Tuesday, almost Taco Wednesday now. It took me forever to get recording because Audacity was being a little BITC double hockey sticks, if you know what I mean. So good to get this finally running again. It took forever to figure out what the heck was wrong with it. Had something to do with the hertz per second or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, it's been fun. I got to get out of here. Good luck this week in your contest. Check out the Open Championship research station. It's not on the website yet, but if you go on the Slack chat, just head on over to Taco About It, the channel Taco About It, my personal channel. I've got it posted right in there. And, it's going to be fun looking at the Open Championship. You got to love a major, especially after 3 weeks of just god-awful golf tournaments. Just worst of the worst fields. It's going to be nice to get back into the major, especially the Open Championship that I, as a Henrik Stenson fan, love oh so much, and it should be a good one. So come check us out with that, come check us out with that content next week. It's going to be fun. All right, I will see you guys next week. You guys take care.
Thank you for listening to the DFS Army podcast. Join the DFS Army today and gain access to our private Slack chat, where you can chat with real DFS pros and coaches, as well as other DFS Army members with winning track records. Also included in your membership is access to our premium articles, DFS Army weighted projections for every sport we offer, from NFL to MMA, weekly player picks and cheat sheets, the strategy vault of timeless concepts, and the DFS Army Domination Station, a truly state-of-the-art lineup optimizer, offering your personal projections or ours. The DFS Army membership is the best value across the industry. Join today and get 2 free ebooks, as well as the secrets to unlocking a new level to your game.